After months of research, testing and analysis, I'm finally ready to bring you the most comprehensive charm guide ever created. In this video, we'll take an in-depth look at every charm in the game. We'll discuss the perks, drawbacks and nuances of each charm, as well as delve into the nitty-gritty details of how each one works, so you don't waste your precious notches on subpar charms. Sit back, relax, and let's check out the charms of Hollow Knight, and I'll be doing a similar thing for when Silksong comes out, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Starting us off is Wayward Compass. This charm costs 1 notch and shows the wearer's location on the map. This charm can be bought from Iselda in Dirtmouth for 220 geo. This shop opens after your first encounter with Cornifer, who can be found in Forgotten Crossroads right here. While Wayward Compass is more of a convenience charm, it goes a long way to prevent players getting lost, and comes highly recommended, especially if you're a new player. Just remember to take it off when tackling bosses, as it won't help in combat. This charm doesn't have any special interactions with any other charm, but it does pair nicely with the quill from Iselda, which you can buy for an additional 120 geo. This will fill in the map after exploring new areas when sitting on a bench, as long as Cornifer's sold you that area's map. Gathering Swarm. This charm costs 1 notch and will automatically pick up any geo dropped by enemies. This charm can be bought from Sly's shop in Dirtmouth for 300 geo. To gain access to the shop, you'll need to find Sly in Forgotten Crossroads. Gathering Swarm is similar to Wayward Compass, in that it's more of a quality of life charm than something that makes you stronger. It can, however, indirectly speed up your exploration, as you can ignore any geo dropped knowing you'll get it anyway. Just be sure you don't change areas while the geo is travelling to you, or it will be lost. It's also useful for getting geo that would otherwise be lost in a spike pit. Last of all, it's worth noting that any geo that falls into acid will still be lost. Gathering Swarm has no special interactions. Stalwart Shell. This charm costs 2 notches and increases the invulnerability frames after getting hit. This charm can be purchased from Sly's shop in Dirtmouth for 300 geo. When you take damage in Hollow Knight, 3 things happen. First, you'll get stunned in place for 0.3 seconds. After this, there will be recoil where you'll fly uncontrollably for a further 0.2 seconds. And finally, you'll regain full control and have a period of damage immunity for another 1.1 seconds. You actually have damage immunity for the full 1.6 seconds this sequence takes, but the last part is the only time you can control your character during it. Let's take the same sequence again, but this time with Stalwart Shell equipped. The initial 0.3 second stun duration remains unchanged. However, moving to the recoil segment, you'll notice it only lasts for 0.8 seconds, shaving off 35% of the duration. Next up, the biggest and most useful change. The time in which you can control your character while immune increases from 1.1 seconds to 1.67 seconds, giving you an extra 0.57 seconds or a 51.8% increase. Now, this sounds great on paper, but how useful is it in practice? Well, sadly, it isn't the most useful charm for general play, but luckily it does have a few niches where it can excel, mostly for cheesing bosses. When used in conjunction with Quick Slash and health charms, and an upgraded Nail, it's possible to completely ignore some boss mechanics and face tank your way to victory. Stalwart Shell has no special interactions. Soul Catcher. This charm costs 2 notches and slightly increases the amount of soul gain when hitting an enemy with your nail. This charm is located in Forgotten Crossroads at the very end of Ancestral Mound, where you obtain the Vengeful Spirit spell. Soul Catcher increases your soul gain from hitting enemies, giving 3 extra soul per hit, or 27% more than usual. Normally you gain 11 soul per hit, but with Soul Catcher, this increases to 14 per hit. Note, this is decreased to a bonus 2 soul if soul is going to your extra reserves. Casting a spell or healing costs 33 soul, so every 11 hits, this charm will earn you a free cast or heal, assuming none has gone to waste. While this sounds decent, it feels pretty low impact in short engagements. If you're starting with 0 soul, you'll still need to hit 3 times before healing or casting, and it only saves you 1 hit compared to normal when filling the soul gauge. Going from empty to completely full including all reserves will save you 7 hits compared to normal, which is a little better. Later on, however, it gets outclassed by Spell Twister for the same notch cost, but more on that later. Soul Catcher is a solid all-round charm. Due to it being accessible so early in the game, it's often the staple of early game charm loadouts, as stronger choices simply aren't available yet. Being a 2-notch charm means it can squeeze into many builds, as Free Soul is useful in both caster builds as well as more general builds. Soulcatcher has no special interactions. Shaman Stone. This charm costs 3 notches and causes spells to deal more damage, and some to increase in size. This charm is purchased from Salubra in the bottom right of Forgotten Crossroads for 220 Geo. There are a few ways to access Salubra's shop. One route is via Resting Grounds, then heading through Blue Lake. Alternatively, you can access it via Forgotten Crossroads if you have Crystal Dash, Mantis Claws, or Monarch Wings. Shaman Stone significantly increases the damage of your spells, and affects each spell slightly differently. Vengeful Spirit and Shade Cell damage is increased by 33%. In addition, the projectile is 30% wider and 60% longer. Desolate Dive damage is increased by 51%. Descending Dark damage is increased by 47%. Howling Wraiths and Abyssal Shriek damage is increased by 54 and 50%. Shaman Stone is extremely powerful and is a core charm in spellcasting loadouts. Pair with charms that generate soul, such as Soul Eater, Soulcatcher and Grubsong, along with Spell Twister to reduce the cost of spells, and you have yourself a very potent caster build. This is extra effective once you have all spell upgrades. Abyss Shriek in particular can deal 120 damage if all 4 ticks land, the second highest instance of damage you can deal in the game, only losing out to all 6 hits of Cyclone Splash with a coiled or pure nail. Shaman Stone special interactions. When combining Shaman Stone and Flukenest, the Fluke projectile increases by an average of 31.9%. And also increases the damage of each fluke by 25%, or if also using Defender's Crest, causes damage to tick faster, dealing potentially 32% more damage. Soul Eater. This charm costs 4 notches and significantly increases the amount of soul gained when hitting an enemy with your nail. This charm is located in Resting Grounds and requires Desolate Dive to access. It's hidden through a breakable grave and through multiple breakable walls. You can think of Soul Eater charm as the Soulcatcher charm's bigger brother. This charm will give 8 extra soul per hit, or 72% more than usual. Normally you gain 11 soul per hit, but with Soulcatcher, this increases to 19 per hit. Note that this decreases to a bonus 6 soul if the soul is going into your extra reserves. Casting a spell or healing costs 33 soul. This means with Soul Eater equipped, it only takes 2 strikes to get enough soul for a heal or a spell, as each strike will give 57.6% of the soul needed to fuel them. This gets you to max base soul in 6 hits, 3 less than normal, and going from empty to full, including reserves, is done in half as many hits, taking 13 hits instead of 26. Although it isn't quite as easy to fit into a build of Soulcatcher due to its 4 notch cost, it is more efficient on a per hit basis, giving 2 soul for every charm notch, versus Soulcatcher's 1.5 soul per notch. But before you decide this is a strict upgrade over Soulcatcher, hold out until we get to the Spell Twister section. As you'd expect, this charm is best suited to caster builds to help power spells. However, it does find an extra niche in Godhome's Radiant bosses. Since one hit kills in this difficulty, it's efficient to overcharm. Soul Eater being the only useful 4-cost charm for this means it's the go-to choice. Soul Eater has no special interactions. Dashmaster. This charm costs 2 notches and reduces dash cooldown, as well as enabling you to dash downwards. This charm can be obtained in Fungal Wastes, adjacent to the Mantis Village. The Dashmaster charm reduces your cooldown from 0.6 seconds to 0.4 seconds, or 33%. In addition to this, it also allows you to do a downward dash, which, if timed right, can prevent stuns when you're falling. Unfortunately, it does not reduce the cooldown of Shade Cloak, which limits its usefulness significantly. It can be a useful option early on before Crystal Dash is unlocked, but for 2 notches is hard to justify using later into the game. Dashmaster special interactions. When combining Dashmaster and Sprintmaster together, the bonus 20% move speed from Sprintmaster is further increased to 39%. When combining Dashmaster and Sharp Shadow together, the damage from Sharp Shadow is increased from 100% nail damage to 150% nail damage rounded up. Sprintmaster. This charm costs 1 notch and increases move speed. This charm can be purchased from Sly after acquiring the Shopkeeper's Key and costs 400 Geo. The Shopkeeper's Key can be found in the Crystal Peak. Sprintmaster increases your move speed while running, taking it from a base 8.3 to 10, which works out to be a roughly 20% boost. Costing only 1 charm means it's a lot more flexible than Dashmaster, and can be handy in avoiding some bosses' attacks. It can, however, take a bit of getting used to the increased speed, and if you're not careful, can lead you to taking damage from walking into enemies. It's also worth noting that the charm only works when you're walking on solid ground and has no effect on swim or dash speed. Sprintmaster special interactions. When combining Dashmaster and Sprintmaster together, the bonus 20% move speed from Sprintmaster is further increased to 39%. When combining Sprintmaster and Weaversong, Weaverlings will move 50% faster as well as jump further. Grubsong. This charm costs 1 notch and generates soul when taking damage. This charm is acquired from Grubfather in Forgotten Crossroads after finding 10 grubs. Grubsong grants 15 soul after the player takes damage. This includes any damage including spikes. Note that even if you take 2 or more masks of damage in a single instance, you'll still only receive 15 soul. If you take damage from an enemy and then fall into spikes or thorns while the invincibility frames are still flashing, no soul will be gained, but you'll still take the damage and be reset. This charm is extremely useful, and is easily one of the best 1-notch charms in the game. It fits nicely in any general use build for extra healing and spells, and if you have room in your spellcasting build, it's good there as well. Difficult platform sections can be cheesed by combining it with Deep Focus and Grubberfly's Elegy. With this combination, you'll gain 50 soul every 2 damage you take, and then can use 33 soul to heal the 2 damage back, for a net gain of 17 soul. Grubsong special interactions. Combining Grubsong and Grubberfly's Elegy will give an additional 10 soul each time you hit for a total of 25 soul. Combining Grubsong and Weaversong will cause any damage the Weaverlings deal to generate 3 soul, even from enemies that don't usually give soul. Oddly enough, this can even trigger after death, meaning you can spawn with a minuscule amount of soul. Grubberfly's Elegy. This charm costs 3 notches, and when at full health causes projectiles to shoot from your nail when striking. This charm is acquired from Grubfather in Forgotten Crossroads after finding all 46 grubs. Grubberfly's Elegy shoots projectiles whenever swinging the nail, which deals 50% nail damage, as long as the user is at full health. The projectile will always deal half the damage of your nail. This means anything that buffs nail damage, such as Nailsmith upgrades, Fragile Strength or Fury of the Fallen, will also increase the damage of the projectile. This charm is fun to play around with and increases your range by roughly 144%. However, its usefulness is hindered since taking any damage deactivates its effects. This relegates it to much more niche uses. Times where taking damage will result in failure, such as the Delicate Flower quest or Radiant difficulty boss fights in Godhome to name a few, are where this charm is best suited. However, if the player is willing to play cautiously, it can be effectively used in many other situations as well. Quick Slash is one of the better combinations to use in a build with it due to the increased attack speed. Heavy Blow is also useful for keeping enemies away with its extra knockback on each projectile. Finally, any charms that give Lifeblood masks over normal masks, such as Lifeblood Core or Lifeblood Heart, can create a damage buffer and delay losing the charm's effects. It's worth noting, however, the buff is lost after a single hit if using Joni's Blessing to convert all masks into Lifeblood. You would then have to sit at a bench to get it back. Although extremely difficult, it is possible to hit a single enemy with both the base nail strike as well as the projectile, effectively dealing 150% damage with a single input. For this to work, the enemy either needs to have a large enough hitbox that the projectile still contacts them towards the end of its flight, or be able to be knocked back significantly so they follow the projectile and stay in its hitbox. Having both Mark of Pride and Longnail makes it a bit easier to find that sweet spot, which seems to be near the end but not quite the tip of the nail's range. Additionally, Heavy Blow can help knock lighter enemies back enough to get this trick to work. Even when doing all of this, it still seems somewhat random if a double hit will occur or not. Some hits that look like they'll surely double hit often don't, and other hits that look completely off sometimes do, so it's a bit of a mystery. Last of all, Mark of Pride and Longnail do not affect the range of the projectiles. Grubberfly's Elegy Special Interactions. Combining Grubsong and Grubberfly's Elegy will give an additional 10 soul each time you are hit for a total of 25 soul. Combining Grubberfly's Elegy and Mark of Pride increases the height of each projectile by 35%. Combining Grubberfly's Elegy and Fury of the Fallen causes the charm to activate when the player has 1 mask of health remaining. Not only that, but the projectiles will also become red and deal 67.5% nail damage instead of 50%. Fragile Heart. This charm costs 2 charm notches and gives the user 2 extra health masks. This charm can be purchased from Leg Eater in Fungal Wastes for 350 Geo or 280 Geo if wearing the Defender's Crest. Fragile Heart is a very straightforward charm, giving a bonus 2 masks of health when equipped. Like all fragile charms, this charm is destroyed upon death and can be repaired by Leg Eater for 200 Geo or 160 Geo if wearing Defender's Crest and asking for a discount. Fragile charm won't break when fighting dream bosses, as the user doesn't technically die when losing to them. And of course, in Steel Soul mode, where death is permanent, the drawbacks don't really apply. Fragile Heart can be upgraded to Unbreakable Heart by talking to Divine in the Grim Troop while it's equipped. Once she consumes the charm, you'll have to pay 12,000 Geo to get it back in its Unbreakable form. This is identical to the Fragile version, except it no longer has the drawback of breaking upon death. As far as the charm itself goes, this is a solid all-round pick, especially when fighting difficult bosses. While it doesn't do anything special, sometimes the 2 extra masks can be the difference between beating a boss and dying. Fragile Heart and Unbreakable Heart have no special interactions. Fragile Greed. This charm costs 2 notches and increases the amount of Geo coins dropped by enemies. This charm can be purchased from Leg Eater in Fungal Wastes for 250 Geo or 200 Geo if wearing the Defender's Crest. Fragile Greed increases the number of coins dropped from enemies by 20% rounded up. The wording in this is important here. It's not 20% more Geo, it's 20% more coins. Here's how it works. First you need to know, Geo drops in 3 different values, 1, 5 and 25, and it's not always in a way that minimises the number of coins. Take Great Husk Sentry, who drops 50 Geo for example. You'd expect this to drop in the form of 2 25 Geo coins, but this is not the case. Instead, this is dropped in the form of 5 Geo coins and 1 25 Geo coin. How the Greed charm works is by increasing the number of each type of coin dropped by 20% rounded up. So in this case, 5 coins would become 6 5 coins for a bonus of 1 extra 5 coin. The 1 25 coin would become 1.2 and then be rounded up to 2 25 coins for a bonus of 1 25 coin. Add this together and our original 50 Geo becomes 80. Giving us a bonus of 60% of the original value, but the exact percentage will vary from enemy to enemy. The extra Geo coins created from this charm will glow white and have a faster spin animation. Obviously, this charm is very useful for farming Geo from enemies, and it can be combined with Gathering Swarm to further speed up farming, as long as you aren't sacrificing damage charms for it. Like all fragile charms, this charm is destroyed upon death, and can be repaired by Leg Eater for 150 Geo or 120 Geo while wearing the Defender's Crest and asking for a discount. In Steel Soul mode, where death is permanent, the drawbacks don't really apply, making them extra useful. Fragile Greed can be upgraded to Unbreakable Greed by talking to Divine in the Grim Troop while it's equipped. Once she consumes the charm, you'll have to pay 9,000 Geo to get it back in its Unbreakable form. Once again, this is identical to the Fragile version, except for it no longer has the drawback of breaking upon death. Fragile and Unbreakable Greed have no special interactions. Fragile Strength. This charm costs 3 notches and increases nail damage. This charm can be purchased from Leg Eater in Fungal Wastes for 600 Geo or 480 Geo if wearing the Defender's Crest. Fragile Strength increases nail damage by 50%, rounded to the nearest whole number. This damage boost is only applied to normal nail attacks. Charms whose damage is based on nail damage do not benefit from the boost, and even nail arts are excluded. The exception to this rule is Grubberfly's Elegy, whose projectiles are boosted in damage by about 27.5%. The Strength charm is one of the few charms in the game that gives you an unconditional raw damage boost, the other being Shaman Stone. Unbreakable Strength is one of, if not the most powerful charm in the game, particularly with a fully upgraded nail, and is a staple of endgame nail builds. A fully upgraded nail deals 21 damage per hit. With the Strength charm, this gets to a whopping 32 damage. Combine this with Longnail and Quick Nail, and you'll dispatch most enemies with ease. Even the tanky Great Husk Sentry will fall to 6 strikes. Like all fragile charms, this charm is destroyed upon death, and can be repaired by Leg Eater for 350 Geo, or 280 Geo if wearing the Defender's Crest and asking for a discount. In Steel Soul mode, where death is permanent, the drawbacks don't really apply, making this charm extra useful. Fragile Strength can be upgraded to Unbreakable Strength by talking to Divine in the Grim Troop while it's equipped. Once you consume the charm, you'll have to pay 15,000 Geo to get it back in its Unbreakable form. This is identical to the Fragile version, except it no longer has the drawback of breaking upon death. Fragile and Unbreakable Strength have no special interactions. Spell Twister. This charm costs 2 notches and reduces the amount of soul needed to cast spells. This charm can be found in Soul Sanctum, in a secret room right before fighting Soulmaster. Spell Twister reduces the cost of spells by 37.5%, taking the cost from 33 to 24, a saving of 9 soul per cast. This means the knight can now cast 4 spells with a full soul meter instead of 3. The best way I could think to compare Spell Twister to its competition, Soul Catcher and Soul Eater, was to calculate what percentage of a spellcast's cost you gain per hit with each charm. To start us off as a baseline, with nothing equipped you gain 11 soul per hit, and a spell costs 33 soul. So this means you're getting 33.33% of a cast per hit, and it would take 3 hits before you can cast, starting at 0 soul. Next up we see Soul Catcher with 14 soul per hit, or 42.4% of a cast. This would take 2.36 hits before we can cast, but you can't do partial hits, so this is rounded up to 3, the same as base. In longer fights however, the overspill would mean you get to cast more often over time. Next we have Spell Twister. This would be the same as base in terms of soul generation, so 11 per hit, but this time we only need 24 soul to cast instead of 33, so each hit will give us 45.8% of a spell per hit, getting us a cast in 2.18 hits. As you can see, this pulls slightly ahead of Soul Catcher for the same amount of notches, but also has the added value of letting you cast 4 spells in succession. Up next we see Soul Eater giving us 19 per hit, each hit giving 57.6% of a cast or heal, taking 1.73 hits before we can cast, rounded up to 2. Now, this looks like a clear winner, but you have to keep in mind it costs twice as many notches. So let's even the playing field here, and take our 2 previous 2-notch charms and team them up. We now get 14 soul per hit, and only need 24 for a cast. This works out to giving us 58.3% of a cast per hit, so we could cast in 1.17 hits. This of course gets rounded to 2 hits before we can cast from 0 soul, but overall actually beats out Soul Eater for the same notch cost. This combo also has the benefit of being able to cast 4 times in a row. However, if we're using soul to mainly heal, it will not be as good. Naturally, this charm is extremely useful in caster-based setups by allowing you to get more out of your soul and therefore dish out more damage. Combine with Shaman Stone for extra damage per cast, and as many soul generating charms as you can fit in for a powerful casting setup. This shines even more once all spell upgrades have been acquired. Just remember the cost reduction doesn't apply to focusing, so try not to take damage if you want to get the most out of this charm. Spell Twister has no special interactions. Steady Body. This charm costs 1 notch and prevents horizontal knockback when striking with the nail. This charm is purchased from Salubra in Forgotten Crossroads for 120 geo. Every time your nail strikes something in Hollow Knight, be it an enemy, spike or object, the knight experiences recoil, pushing them back in the opposite direction. This charm removes that recoil completely. This only affects horizontal recoil, and things like downward striking to pogo remains unchanged. The effectiveness of Steady Body changes drastically depending on the situation, so we're going to start from where it's least effective all the way to where it's most effective, one by one. Steady Body is least effective and almost not worth using for general play, and what I mean by this is situations where you're out exploring and just playing the game normally. It can make combat feel a bit smoother and does help more aggressive playstyles, but on the standard enemy that only takes a few hits to die anyway, it just doesn't really give you enough to be worth it. The next situation where Steady Body is not effective is when fighting bosses that don't get knocked back by your attacks and also have low mobility. Examples being False Knight or Brooding Morlech. As you can see from this target dummy, it's pretty easy to compensate for the recoil. Even in this example when I'm using Quick Slash, I'm still able to manage the recoil and take full advantage of the extra DPS Quick Slash provides. Steady Body could still be used here, but it would be more for the convenience of not having to think about staying in range, which, if there's a lot going on and you're struggling, could be useful. Now we start to look at situations where Steady Body becomes decent. This is against bosses who get knocked back when you hit them or have good mobility, such as Hornet or Lost Kin. The combination of both you and the boss getting knocked back in opposite directions means it becomes a lot harder to stay in range while also consistently hitting with your nail. There is some downtime between nail attacks where you can manually close some of the distance, but using Steady Body here lets you stick to the target and keep up the pressure even while they're moving. And last of all, the ideal situation where Steady Body shines. Again, this is against bosses who can be knocked back or immobile, but this time when you have Quick Slash equipped. Steady Body with Quick Slash allows you to put immense pressure on many bosses and outright bully them if played right. Normally the weakness of Quick Slash is how hard it is to constantly get hits off, but Steady Body can help alleviate this weakness and unlock its full potential. As you can see in the footage, you can dish out constant damage and stick to the boss even while they move. Adding in a range enhancing charm like Longnail or Mark of Pride, and this becomes even more consistent and safe. So as you can see, Steady Body ranges from being nearly useless to situationally one of the best one-notch charms in the game. Steady Body has no special interactions. Heavy Blow. This charm costs 2 notches and increases the knockback of attacks. This charm can be found from Sly after acquiring the Shopkeeper's Key and costs 350 Geo. The Shopkeeper's Key can be found in the Crystal Peak. Heavy Blow increases the distance enemies are knocked back by your nail by 75%, or 33% when using the Great Slash Nail Art. On top of this, it also decreases the amount of hits it takes to stagger a boss by 1. This charm is pretty straightforward and allows you to keep enemies at bay more effectively. The only downside is there aren't many situations where you really need this, especially for 2 notches. This comes with the side effect of lowering your damage output. For the same reason Steady Body increases DPS by allowing you to stick to your target, Heavy Blow does the exact opposite and pushes enemies out of range, meaning you can't deal damage to them as often. To add further insult, it also costs twice as much as Steady Body, making it one of the worst charms in the game. It does have a useful niche when combined with the ranged attacks of Grubberfly's Elegy, as well as Quick Slash. This combo gives rapid firing ranged nail strikes with good knockback, meaning you can kill most normal enemies before they reach you. Heavy Blow has no special interactions. Quick Slash. This charm costs 3 notches and increases the attack speed of your nail. This charm can be found in Kingdom's Edge through a breakable floor near a training dummy. Quick Slash increases nail attack speed by approximately 46.3%, taking you from 2.44 to 3.57 attacks per second. With a pure nail and perfect inputs, this would be 51.24 DPS before Quick Slash and 75 DPS after. Again, an increase of 46.3% in damage. That's the basics, but getting to these numbers is a bit more complicated, so let's delve into how it works. There are 2 limitations that affect how often you can swing your nail. The first is the attack animation. This is the time it takes for the nail attack animation to play out and lasts 0.35 seconds. The other is the attack cooldown. This is the minimum time the game makes you wait before you can swing again and starts the moment you swing your nail. This cooldown is 0.41 seconds. If the attack animation and attack cooldown are both over, the knight will be able to swing once again. The attack animation and attack cooldown start at the same time, but since the attack cooldown is longer than the attack animation, it never gets in the way of your attacks. Keep this in mind as it'll be important later. Now we know a bit more about how nail attacks work, we can get into what Quick Slash actually does. Once equipped, it reduces the attack animation time by 20% and the attack cooldown time by 39%. This means the attack animation now takes 0.28 seconds and the attack cooldown goes down to 0.25 seconds. But something funny happens here. Now the attack cooldown is actually shorter than the animation time, meaning even though our cooldown would let us attack once every 0.25 seconds, we actually have to wait another 0.03 seconds for our animation to complete. There are ways around this, using various tricks to cancel the animation, but it's extremely advanced and goes beyond the scope of this guide. Quick Slash excels in any nail-focused builds, or even as a 1-charm DPS booster before Unbreakable Strength is available. It isn't the easiest charm to fit in, being 3 notches, but it's handy in a wide range of scenarios, from killing standard enemies faster to shredding bosses. It pairs well with Longnail, Mark of Pride, or, if you're feeling spicy, Grubberfly's Elegy, for the extra range and comfort. As we mentioned in the previous section, Steady Body is the charm that really unlocks Quick Slash's potential and lets it shine. The only thing bad about Quick Slash is how quickly it causes recoil to push you out of range. Steady Body removes this handicap completely. Soul Eater and Soul Catcher are also potent combos. Since you'll be hitting more often, the soul these charms will give will generate even faster. And of course, for even more damage, Unbreakable Strength. As I said, 3 notches is a lot to ask, but as long as you can make use of the extra attack speed, you'll be rewarded with a huge damage increase. Quick Slash has no special interactions. Longnail. This charm costs 2 notches and slightly increases the range of your nail. This charm can be purchased from Salubra in Forgotten Crossroads for 300 Geo. Longnail increases your nail's range by 15%. Not much more to really say about this one, it does exactly what it says on the box. Having the reasonable notch cost of 2 means it's a solid choice for general builds, and isn't too hard to squeeze in. 15% extra range doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes spacing your attacks and pogoing a lot more forgiving, and just generally makes combat feel a lot more fluid. It can be paired with Mark of Pride for an even greater range boost, giving a total of 40% extra range. This is a fun combo, but can be a little overkill, especially for the 5 notches it costs. It's even useful in builds that don't solely focus on nail attacks. If I'm crafting a build and have 2 spare notches, it's always a contender to fill the spot. There aren't many scenarios where this charm won't be useful, so it's always a solid pick. Longnail has no special interactions. Mark of Pride. This charm costs 3 notches and increases the range of your nail. This charm can be acquired in the Mantis Village, in a room only accessible after defeating the Mantis Lords. Mark of Pride increases your nail's range by 25%. This is similar to Longnail, but you gain an additional 10% range at the cost of 1 extra notch. Mark of Pride is more notch efficient than Longnail, giving 8.33% range per notch versus Longnail's 7.5% range per notch. However, it can be argued the lower cost on Longnail makes it more flexible in builds. As mentioned previously, the two can be stacked, giving 40% extra nail range at the cost of 5 notches. Mark of Pride is essentially Longnail's big brother, and because of this, it shares all the same positives and synergies as Longnail does, and it's still really good in almost any situation. Just remember, you'll be down a valuable 1 notch charm compared to using Longnail. Mark of Pride special interactions. Combining Grubberfly's Elegy and Mark of Pride increases the height of each projectile by 35%. Fury of the Fallen. This charm costs 2 notches and boosts nail damage when at 1 health. This charm can be found in King's Pass in a secret area. Fury of the Fallen boosts nail damage by 75% when you have 1 mask of health remaining. The damage boost applies to all nail attacks, including nail arts and Grubberfly's Elegy projectiles. This is actually the very first charm the knight can encounter, as it's in the starting area and doesn't require any special abilities to access. It's also the only damage boosting charm you can access for a long time. To make the most of this charm, you have to be playing 1 hit away from death at all times, which for all but the best players is a bit too much to ask for. It can still act as a final stand type of charm, and maybe let you make some clutch saves, so even for the average player it still has its uses. The downside can be somewhat overcome by lowering your health to 1 and then using Lifeblood marks to preserve the effect. However, this requires a bit of legwork and planning. Joni's Blessing converts all your health to Lifeblood, however this is coded as normal health, so does not work to activate the bonus damage. Fury of the Fallen special interactions. Combining Grubberfly's Elegy and Fury of the Fallen causes Grubberfly's Elegy's projectiles to activate when the player has 1 mask of health remaining. Not only that, but the projectiles will become red and deal 67.5% nail damage instead of 50%. Combining Glowing Womb and Fury of the Fallen will cause hatchlings to deal an additional 5 damage, for a total of 14 when at 1 health. When combining Hiveblood, Joni's Blessing and Fury of the Fallen, if the knight gets to 1 mask and lets Hiveblood recover the 2nd mask, the damage buff will be retained for the nail and nail arts but not the hatchlings, even though you'll still have 2 masks left. Thorns of Agony. This charm costs 1 notch and damages enemies around you after taking damage. This charm can be found in Greenpath through a platforming section, which requires Mothwing Cloak. Thorns of Agony triggers when taking damage and causes thorns to burst out of the knight, dealing 100% nail damage. This does come with a slight drawback. When thorns trigger, they lock you into an animation, extending the time before you regain control of the knight. This lasts 0.3 seconds, the same as the initial stun after being hit, and eats up some of the iframes you could otherwise be using to reposition or fight. Since Stalwart Shell reduces the recoil time to 0.8 seconds, this means Thorns triggers that much faster after getting hit. The extra 0.4 seconds of iframes also somewhat makes up for the 0.3 second Thorn animation as well. Due to the short range of the Thorns, it can also be detrimental when fighting ranged enemies or mobile enemies, who can outright avoid the damage. Since no soul is gained when Thorns of Agony is hit, it also can kill enemies before you're able to get enough soul from them to heal. Still, it does only cost 1 notch, and can be very valuable early on for newer players who tend to take damage a bit more often. Just don't take it into Fog Canyon. Accidentally killing a jellyfish more times than not will result in you taking 2 masks of damage. On rare occasions, it can also hit enemies twice if they're extremely close to you when it triggers. If the knight is hit but damage is avoided, for example with Carefree Melody or Baldur Shell, Thorns will still trigger. Overall, this is a solid charm for 1 notch since it's basically free damage. However, it does reward playing poorly, and as you get better at the game, this charm becomes worse. Thorns of Agony has no special interactions. Baldur Shell. This charm costs 2 notches and prevents damage while focusing. This charm can be found in Howling Cliffs in a secret area accessed by jumping down a fake chest. Baldur Shell creates a shell around the knight while focusing. If hit, the channel is still interrupted but no damage is taken, although the soul will still be wasted. This can be done up to 4 times before the shell breaks and needs to be repaired by sitting at a bench. The remaining health of the shell is shown in the top left corner with a small blue shell icon that gradually gets more cracked as it's used up. This charm is decent enough when fighting bosses, although similar to Thorns of Agony, the better you get at the game, the less useful this becomes, as the player will learn when it's safe to heal without getting hit. It does give you the freedom to attempt risky heals during boss fights, with very little punishment if you fail, and can be used as a sort of block if you use focus right before getting hit. However, since it breaks after 4 times, it's severely held back in this regard. There are a few small synergies worth mentioning, none of which are particularly powerful. The first is using it with Stalwart Shell. Since getting hit with Baldur Shell triggers invincibility frames, Stalwart Shell extends the duration of these, even though no damage is taken. Thorns of Agony will also trigger when the shell is hit, giving free damage without actually taking damage. Again, this is limited in usefulness due to the fact that the shell breaks in 4 hits. Carefree Melody also has a chance to trigger. If the damage is prevented, then the shell will not take damage. And last of all, if you're in the process of recovering health using Hiveblood, Baldur Shell will prevent it being interrupted if you hit while focusing. Another trick that can be used against bosses is focusing during a roar that would otherwise stun the knight. A glitch will occur that causes the shell to remain even after the channel is interrupted. This will absorb the next hit you take, but you'll still be free to move and fight as you normally would. Baldur Shell special interactions. Combining Baldur Shell in the shape of Un will change the appearance of the knight's slug form, giving him a shell or a shell with mushrooms when also combined with Spore Shroom. Flukenest. This charm costs 3 notches and replaces Vengeful Spirit and its upgrade Shade Soul into an alternate spell. This charm can be found in Royal Waterways by defeating the Flukemarm boss. Flukenest turns Vengeful Spirit and its upgrades into a shotgun of flukes. Upon casting the spell, 9 flukes will be fired. If you have the Soul Shade, this number will go up to 16. Each deals 4 damage for a total of 36 or 64 damage respectively, assuming all hit. Compare this to the base damage of Vengeful Spirit, which is 15, or Soul Shade, which is 30, and you can see this more than doubles the damage of the cast. The downside of this, of course, is the spell has a much shorter range and it can be hard to ensure every fluke hits its target. Adding Shaman Stone to this will push the damage up to 5 for a total of 45 or 80 for the upgraded version. Furthermore, this damage can be increased as flukes last about 1 second on the ground before they despawn. This can result in them damaging the same target multiple times. If you have a spare room on a spellcaster build and are willing to put up with the bad range this charm has, it can put out some really good damage. Unfortunately though, if it's a choice between this and Shaman Stone takes the cake, as it has a similar damage boost that affects all 3 spells and doesn't have the downside of poor range. Having Flukenest equipped also unlocks unique dialogue with Fluke Hermit in the Waterways. Flukenest special interactions. When combining Flukenest and Defender's Crest, 1 giant fluke is launched instead of the smaller swarm. This hits for 3 initial damage and then explodes into a dung cloud lasting 2.2 seconds and dealing an additional 20 to 23 damage. Note, this does the same damage regardless of if you've upgraded to Shade Soul. When combining Shaman Stone and Flukenest, fluke projectiles increase by an average of 31.9%. Each fluke also deals an additional 1 damage. If also combined with Defender's Crest, the dung cloud damage ticks faster for a total of 26 to 30 damage, plus the initial 3 impact damage. Defender's Crest. This charm costs 1 notch and emits a damaging gas cloud around the knight. This charm can be found in Royal Waterways by defeating the Dung Defender boss. Defender's Crest emits an AoE cloud every 0.75 seconds that will linger for 1.1 seconds. Each individual cloud deals 1 damage every 0.3 seconds, for a maximum of 3 damage per cloud. Since clouds spawn faster than they vanish, multiple clouds can be out at once and damage the target. In an ideal situation, this can put out approximately 4.88 damage per second. This sounds like okay damage early on, however bear in mind that this is under an absolutely perfect scenario. In reality, due to enemies moving and its poor range, the already mediocre DPS will be far worse, and once you have a nail upgrade or two, the damage it deals quickly becomes even more laughable. They say you can't make shine, but it does have a niche where it can. The Broken Vessel fight and its Dream variant constantly has infected balloon spawns that float towards you. These only have 1 health, so the damage aura from Defender's Crest will pop these before they can hit you, meaning you can effectively ignore them. Even better, this opens up a lot of healing opportunities that normally wouldn't be possible. Other than that though, the best use for this is getting a 20% discount from Leg Eater. Just walk up to him with the charm equipped and he'll slash his prices. There are also extra dialogue available from Elderbug, White Lady, Relic Seeker Lem, Dung Defender, Tuck, and the Divine when wearing the charm. And Tuck will even give you a free rancid egg. And one more bit of trivia is when in the Pleasure House kitchen, the flies there will be attracted to you. Sadly, this is probably one of the worst charms in the game, even at 1 notch, and as you're about to see, it actually makes certain charms weaker when combined with them. Defender's Crest Special Interactions. When combining Flukenest and Defender's Crest, 1 giant fluke is launched instead of the smaller swarm. This hits for 3 initial damage and then explodes into a dung cloud lasting 2.2 seconds and dealing an additional 22 damage over time. Note, this does the same damage regardless of if you've upgraded to Shade Soul, and even in a best case scenario, deals less damage than the swarm of flukes in exchange for greater range and area of effect. When Glowing Womb and Defender's Crest is combined, spawned hatchlings will take on a different appearance. They will deal 5 less damage on impact but leave a small AoE cloud for 1 second, dealing up to 5 damage. At best, this deals the same damage as a normal hatchling, and at worst you lose out on damage due to enemies moving out of the cloud's effect. When combining Spore Shroom and Defender's Crest, the Spore Cloud generated after channeling gets increased damage, going from 27 damage to 40, a bit over a 48% damage boost. The visuals are also changed. Glowing Womb. This charm costs 2 notches and uses soul to spawn hatchlings to attack enemies. This charm is found in Forgotten Crossroads in a secret area requiring Crystal Dash to access. Glowing Womb consumes 8 soul to spawn a hatchling that will attack any nearby enemies, exploding on contact and dealing 9 damage. Hatchlings can spawn once every 4 seconds and a maximum of 4 can be had at any one time. In terms of soul efficiency, this works out to 1.125 damage per point of soul spent, which puts it ahead of Desolate Dive, Vengeful Spirit, and its upgrade Shade Soul, assuming they only hit 1 target. Taking into account their 4-second spawn rate and ignoring travel time, Glowing Womb deals a pitiful 2.25 damage per second, although if you have 4 ready to go before a fight starts, the 36 damage burst is nothing to scoff at, particularly early on in the game where it can easily one-shot all but the tankiest of non-boss enemies. The main problem with Glowing Womb, similar to Defender's Crest, is it just doesn't really have a good way to scale into late game. Whereas spells in your nail get huge damage boosts and have great charm synergy, Glowing Womb stays at its already average starting point. Despite this, you can still make a pretty good summoner build with Glowing Womb, Weaversong and Grimmchild. If hatchlings are killing enemies, then there's a good chance you won't be gaining much soul. But adding Grubsong to this build will allow the special interaction between Weaversong and Grubsong to solve this problem. Grubsong allows Weaverlings to give 3 soul each time they hit something, giving you a way to constantly fuel your hatchling spawns, and still have plenty of soul spare for spells and healing. A well-played nail or spellcaster build is always going to outperform a summoner build, but the strength of the summoner build lies in how little it demands of the player. You can solely focus on surviving and healing, throwing the occasional spell or nail strike, and still be doing respectable damage. Glowing Womb Special Interactions. Combining Glowing Womb and Fury of the Fallen will cause hatchlings to deal an additional 5 damage, for a total of 14 when at 1 health. When Glowing Womb and Defender's Crest is combined, spawned hatchlings will take on a different appearance. They will deal 5 less damage on impact but leave a small AoE cloud for 1 second, dealing up to 5 damage. At best, this deals the same damage as a normal hatchling, and at worst you lose out on damage due to enemies moving out of the cloud's effect. Quick Focus. This charm costs 3 notches and increases focus speed. This charm can be purchased from Salubra in Forgotten Crossroads for 800 Geo. Quick Focus speeds up the channel speed when focusing by 33%. Focusing can be broken down into 2 parts. The first is a 0.25 second startup animation. This only plays out if you weren't already previously focusing. For example, if you were healing 3 masks in a row, the startup animation would only play 1 time at the start, so long as you don't let go of the focus button. Next up comes the channeling duration. This lasts 0.891 seconds, making the overall focus duration 1.141 seconds to heal a single mask. Now, let's see that again, this time with quick focus equipped. Once again, we have the 0.25 second startup animation, which remains unchanged. Next up, we have the channeling duration. Quick focus reduces this down to 0.594 seconds, which is a reduction of 0.297 seconds, or 33.33%. Overall, this ends up being 0.844 seconds all up, or 26% faster to heal a single mask. Now, this does slightly change when healing for 2 or 3 masks in a row. Between the end of the channel and the start of another, the heal animation will play, which lasts about 0.21 seconds, and is also unaffected by quick focus. If this is starting to sound a bit complicated, then don't worry. All you really need to know is you're saving just under 0.3 seconds every time you heal with quick focus. This charm shines most of all in boss fights. Most bosses have a narrow window where it's safe to heal, but with quick focus equipped, you can heal at times that would normally be impossible. Or heal 2 masks at a time you'd normally only have time to heal once. While it's one of the better charms for boss fights, for general exploration, it's relegated to being more of a quality of life charm, as most of the time you can just run away or heal after enemies are defeated anyway. A few interesting charm combos with quick focus include Stalwart Shell and Deep Focus. Stalwart Shell lasts just long enough to get a heal in during the invincibility frames. And Deep Focus, which increases the time it takes to focus, is mostly negated when combined with quick focus, resulting in healing 2 masks at just over the time it would take to heal 1. But more about that in the Deep Focus section. Quick Focus Special Interactions. When combining Shape of Un with Quick Focus, your move speed is doubled, going from 6 to 12 while focusing. Before we continue, only around 1% of people who watch these videos are subscribed. If you've made it this far and like what you've seen, why not help me out by hitting that sub button and leaving a like? Now without further ado, back to the video. Deep Focus. This charm costs 4 notches and doubles the amount you heal at the expense of longer focus times. This charm can be found in Crystal Peaks in a secret room made of crystal. Deep Focus doubles the amount of masks healed when focusing, at the cost of increasing channel time by 65%. This takes the channel time from 0.891 seconds to 1.47 seconds, an extra 0.58 seconds. When taking into account the total time it takes to heal once, this works out to be 50.75% slower than normal. However, if we're comparing the time it takes to heal 2 masks normally, then it actually saves 0.52 seconds, which is 23.27% faster. Deep Focus excels at times where you have lots of time to heal but limited soul. The most obvious example of this is platforming sections, where taking damage is likely, but there aren't many ways of regaining soul. And it's not too bad for general exploration as well, assuming you can justify the 4 notches it costs. As mentioned in the Grubsong section, this is a strong combination for platforming, and adding Grubberfly's Elegy, as well as only healing every second time, can result in unlimited soul and healing. While it can be used in combat, the long focus time leaves the knight vulnerable, and severely limits the viable healing windows. This can somewhat be remedied by using quick focus as well, but the combo takes 7 notches, which is a huge commitment just for healing. One final note, if you add Deep Focus to the Quick Focus Shape of Un special interaction, the increased slither speed is retained, even though the focus lasts longer. This results in the ability to move quite a large distance quickly while focusing. Deep Focus Special Interactions. When combining Deep Focus and Spore Shroom, the spore cloud created when focusing is increased in size by 35%. Lifeblood Heart. This charm costs 2 notches and adds 2 Lifeblood masks when resting. This charm can be purchased from Salubra in Forgotten Crossroads for 250 Geo. Lifeblood Heart adds 2 Lifeblood masks when resting on a bench. This works exactly the same as Lifeblood you find out in the world and cannot be healed back once lost. This limits the charm's usefulness, as once you've taken 2 damage, you now pretty much have 2 dead charm notches. It does shine in situations where healing windows are limited, such as Nightmare King Grimm, and it's viable for spellcaster builds, where you don't want to waste soul for healing. Although in this situation, it will be competing with charms that give extra soul. Lifeblood masks can be used with Grubberfly's Elegy to retain its projectile effect, which can have its merits. Lifeblood Heart has no special interactions. Lifeblood Core. This charm costs 3 notches and adds 4 Lifeblood masks when resting. This charm can be found in the Abyss through a locked door that only opens if the knight has 14 Lifeblood masks or 15 when using Joni's Blessing. Lifeblood Core works exactly the same as Lifeblood Heart, except the amount of Lifeblood masks is doubled for only costing 1 extra notch. This does make it a little less flexible, but it makes up for that in its efficiency, giving 1.33 health per notch versus Lifeblood Heart's 1 per notch. This charm has all the same strengths, weaknesses and synergies as Lifeblood Heart. Lifeblood Core has no special interactions. Joni's Blessing. This charm costs 4 notches and converts all masks to Lifeblood, as well as giving bonus extra masks. This charm is found in Howling Cliffs in a sub-area called Joni's Repose. Joni's Blessing converts all masks into Lifeblood, and also boosts total masks by 40% rounded up. This 40% boost does not apply to masks gained via Lifeblood Heart or Lifeblood Core, and it also doesn't boost any masks gained by killing Life Seeds, although it will cause them to flock to you instead of fleeing. Masks gained from Fragile or Unbreakable Heart, however, will benefit from the boost. 40% extra health sounds great, however, even with the maximum base masks of 9, this will only net you an extra 4 masks. This loses out to Lifeblood Core in terms of notch efficiency. This forces you to pair it with Fragile Heart, which gives a bonus 2 masks. This would at max give you 11 masks of health, making the bonus from Joni's Blessing a total of 5 masks, for a grand total of 16 masks of health. This is nice, however the combo costs 6 notches, which is nothing to scoff at. This boosts its efficiency to 1.25 health per notch, compared to Lifeblood Core's 1.33. Another downside of this charm is losing the ability to heal, as your entire health pool will become Lifeblood. As with all Lifeblood charms, this might be worth it if you're in a situation where healing is impossible anyway, or if you want to use your soul for casting spells, but it tends to be a pretty poor choice outside of select boss fights. If you're looking to open the Lifeblood door to access Lifeblood Core, this charm is extremely useful for getting the required 15 Lifeblood needed to open it. Equipping all 3 Lifeblood charms, as well as Fragile Heart, will give you a whopping 22 masks of health. And if you want to take it one step further, if you manage to collect every life seed in the world without taking damage, you can get an absolutely titanic 41 masks of health, although this is very impractical to actually do. Joni's Blessing has anti-synergy with Grubberfly's Elegy. Since all your masks will be converted to Lifeblood, taking any damage will mean you won't be able to heal back up and reactivate Grubberfly's Elegy projectiles. Joni's Blessing Special Interactions. Combining Hiveblood and Joni's Blessing will not disable the regenerative effect of Hiveblood. The last mask lost will slowly regenerate, taking 20 seconds instead of the usual 10. The masks will also take on a unique appearance of blue honeycomb. When combining Hiveblood, Joni's Blessing and Fury of the Fallen, the knight gets to 1 mask and lets Hiveblood recover the second mask. The damage buff of Fury of the Fallen will be retained for nail and nail arts, but not hatchlings, even though you'll have 2 masks of health. Hiveblood. This charm costs 4 notches and regenerates the last mask lost over time. This charm can be found in the Hive, in a room after defeating the Hive boss. Hiveblood lets you recover 1 mask of health after taking damage. It takes 10 seconds for the mask to recover and can be interrupted if you take further damage, which will cause the process to start again. Visually, the knight's mask will be replaced with a honeycomb style mask. And when one is regenerating, it will take on the appearance of dripping honey and slowly grow until it forms a full honeycomb mask. If the knight takes 2 damage at once, only 1 mask will regenerate. Healing while the mask is regenerating will restore the same mask, negating Hiveblood's effect. This charm is particularly useful for platforming sections, as you can simply wait the 10 seconds if you fall into spikes to recover the lost health. It's also useful when exploring, as there's often a break between combat encounters, meaning it has the time it needs to function. This can be used with Grubberfly's Elegy and Grubsong in place of Deep Focus to cheese platforming sections, and will let you generate infinite soul. However, unlike the Deep Focus setup, you'll have to make sure you don't take damage again within the 10 seconds between each platforming attempt. It can also be used in combat where stopping to focus is difficult, although care must be taken not to take additional damage while the mask is regenerating, or the charm will lose effectiveness. Any charms that can prevent damage, such as Carefree Melody, Dreamshield, or to a lesser extent Baldur Shell, synergize well with Hiveblood, and can prevent regeneration from being interrupted. Equipping Hiveblood will also render enemies in the hive passive, which is useful if you ever have a reason to go back to the area. Overall, Hiveblood is a decent charm that performs well in specific scenarios, or in the hands of players who don't often get hit. Just keep in mind, it can be rendered completely useless if you play poorly, which is a huge problem considering its hefty 4-notch cost. Hiveblood Special Interactions. Combining Hiveblood and Joni's Blessing will not disable the regenerative effect of Hiveblood. The last mask lost will slowly regenerate, taking 20 seconds instead of the usual 10. The masks will also take on a unique appearance of blue honeycomb. When combining Hiveblood, Joni's Blessing, and Fury of the Fallen, if the knight gets to one mask and lets Hiveblood recover the second mask, the damage buff of Fury of the Fallen will be retained for Nail and Nail Arts, but not Hatchlings, even though you'll have 2 masks of health. Spore Shroom. This charm costs 1 notch and creates a spore cloud around you while focusing. This charm can be found in Fungal Wastes at the end of a platforming section. Spore Shroom will release a cloud of spores around the knight when focusing that deals 27 damage over 4.1 seconds. Each tick deals 1 damage and happens every 0.15 seconds, which means it deals about 6.6 damage per second. This has an internal cooldown of 4.25 seconds, or until the knight takes damage, so this can't be abused by starting and stopping the focus channel. Enemies are only damaged while in the cloud, so the charm is most effective versus slow or non-mobile enemies. While Spore Shroom has an interesting effect and only costs 1 notch, it's still outclassed by most other 1-notch charms, such as Grubsong or even Nailmaster's Glory. It fills a similar role as Defender's Crest, but trades the constant uptime for more DPS. Both of these charms fill a similar purpose, but unlike Defender's Crest, it feels like you really have to go out of your way to get any real value from it. Combining it with Quick Focus will make it a lot easier to use in combat, as you can quickly focus to heal and spawn the cloud, then continue fighting as normal. Shape of Oon is also another option, as you can reposition while healing for more safety. This enables you to finish in positions that would otherwise have been too dangerous to start focusing at, letting you land spore cloud damage more consistently. It also has some additional non-combat effects. While wearing Spore Shroom, you'll be able to read the Mushroom Lore tablets and also talk to Mr. Mushroom in Fungal Wastes. This will provide some additional lore. Spore Shroom Special Interactions. When combining Spore Shroom and Defender's Crest, the spore cloud generated after channeling gets increased damage, going from 27 damage to 40, a bit over a 48% damage boost. The visuals are also changed. When combining Deep Focus and Spore Shroom, the spore cloud created when focusing is increased in size by 35%. When combining Spore Shroom with Shape of Oon, the appearance of your slug form will have mushrooms on its back, or if also combined with Baldur Shell, a shell with mushrooms on it. This is purely a cosmetic change. Sharp Shadow. This charm costs 2 notches and damages enemies when dashing through them. This charm is found in Deepness behind a Shade Gate, which requires Shade Cloak. Sharp Shadow deals 100% nail damage to enemies when dashing through them with Shade Cloak. It also extends the range of Shade Cloak dashes by 40%. The damage in extra range does not apply to normal dashes, and only the empowered dashes from Shade Cloak. This charm is actually quite good, and lets you use your Shade Cloak offensively. In boss fights, this means you can often get in extra damage during windows you'd normally have to be on the defensive. And Shade Cloak has a 1.5 second cooldown, so it can be used quite often. The 40% extra range helps both with landing damage, as well as ensuring you don't come out of the Shade Cloak's invincibility window inside an enemy's hitbox and take damage. Be warned though, the extra range isn't always a good thing. Certain areas and platforming sections are set up with the normal dash range in mind, so having the bonus range can sometimes make these sections significantly harder. Sharp Shadow can damage enemies that wouldn't normally take damage from a nail. For example, it's one of the few ways to hurt and kill Revik in Spirit's Glade. Sharp Shadow can be worked into most builds and do fairly well as long as you adjust your gameplay accordingly, but due to the awkwardness of platforming with increased range, it's best kept for bosses. Surprisingly, it doesn't necessarily work better with nail builds versus spell builds, as the damage scaling only considers nail base damage, and is not affected by charms such as Unbreakable Strength or Fury of the Fallen. But keep in mind, if using a spell-reliant build, no soul is gained when hitting enemies with Sharp Shadow. Sharp Shadow Special Interactions. When combining Dashmaster and Sharp Shadow together, the damage from Sharp Shadow is increased from 100% nail damage to 150% nail damage rounded up. Shape of Oon. This charm costs 2 notches and allows the user to move while focusing. This charm is given by Oon under the Lake of Oon and requires Isma's Tear to access. This charm will cause the knight to take the form of a slug while focusing. This has 2 main effects, the first being the ability to move while still focusing. After the 0.25 second startup time, you'll be able to freely move. However, you won't be able to jump, dash, or use abilities. Chaining heals together will also leave you stationary for the 0.21 second heal animation, and you'll move 27.7% slower than the normal walking speed. The second function this form provides is a 47% reduction of the height of your hitbox. This height reduction means you can avoid attacks that would normally hit you. Shape of Oon opens up loads of healing opportunities during boss fights that would otherwise be high risk or impossible. It's definitely an underrated charm and worth putting on if you're struggling to find a healing window. Unlike its main competitor, Quick Focus, there is a bit more of a learning curve to using this charm. It takes a bit of practice to get used to the small delay before you can start moving during a channel. If you can master it, however, you'll find yourself with an extra notch to spare when compared to Quick Focus. Overall, this is a solid charm, and can often surprise you with how good it can be if you give it a chance. Shape of Oon Special Interactions. When combining Shape of Oon with Quick Focus, your move speed is doubled, going from 6 to 12 while focusing. This is just under 45% faster than the knight's normal walking speed, and is even faster than using the Sprintmaster Dashmaster combo, at least in small bursts. If you also add Deep Focus, the extra movement speed will be retained, despite the channel lasting longer. When combined with Spore Shroom, Baldur Shell, or a combination of the two, the appearance of the slug will change. Nailmaster's Glory. This charm costs 1 notch and reduces the charge time for nail arts. This charm is given by Sly in Dirtmouth after obtaining all 3 nail arts. Nailmaster's Glory reduces charge time for nail arts by 44%, taking the charge time from 1.35 seconds to 0.75 seconds. And the best part is, it only costs 1 notch. Nail arts are extremely powerful, however, due to their charge time, they can feel very awkward and clunky to use in combat. This charm essentially fixes that and makes them feel far smoother to use. To use a nail art, you must first attack, which eats up extra time. This can be reduced by equipping Quick Slash, or alternatively, starting the charge midway through a dash. Both of these methods have similar results. After the first nail art is used, they can be chained together by holding the button down right after releasing it, removing the need to do an action in between. If you plan to use nail arts at all and have a spare notch, then this charm is an excellent choice. Cyclone Slash in particular is one of the highest DPS moves you can do with a fully upgraded nail, provided you could land all 6 hits, so giving up 1 notch to make it even better is a great deal. Nailmaster's Glory has no special interactions. Weaversong. This charm costs 2 notches and summons 3 Weaverlings to fight for you. This charm can be found in Deep Nest, in the Weaver's Den sub-area. Weaversong summons 3 Weaverlings to fight for you. They deal 3 damage on contact with enemies and cannot be killed. The damage the Weaverlings put out is fairly low, especially later in the game. However, unlike glowing womb hatchlings, Weaverlings do not consume soul. It's hard to talk about Weaversong without touching on its special interactions, as without them, they simply deal a bit of damage and there isn't a whole lot to talk about. When combined with Grubsong, each time they deal damage, you'll receive 3 soul. In the right circumstances, this can actually add up fairly quickly, and can be a consideration when playing a spellcasting build. The actual DPS they put out can vary wildly, as the Weaverlings depend on touching their targets to deal damage. They do somewhat go out of their way to walk and leap into enemies, but it can be fairly unpredictable, and they can often end up on the wrong side of the screen doing nothing. To get a ballpark figure for their DPS numbers, I stood still against the Brooding Morlek boss using invincibility and did nothing but let the Weaverlings deal damage until it died. Keep in mind when you look at the following numbers, this is ideal circumstances, and you wouldn't get a situation this perfect in real gameplay. Brooding Morlek has 1050 health, and the Weaverlings managed to kill it in 3 minutes and 44.6 seconds, meaning they dealt 4.675 damage per second. Not too bad. Doing a second test, I this time also equipped Sprintmaster, which increases Weaverling move speed by 50% and increases leap range. Now theoretically, this should let Weaverlings stick to and chase their targets better, increasing overall DPS. This was not the case. in the exact same conditions, Sprintmaster boosted Weavelings actually took 1 second longer than the base Weavelings, achieving 4.656 damage per second. This was unexpected, and my only explanation is the added speed actually caused them to overshoot their target and caused them to spend extra time getting back into range. Admittedly, this is a small sample size, so take this info with a grain of salt, but based off these results, it doesn't seem like it's really worth going out of your way to use Sprintmaster with them. This charm definitely does a lot better against less mobile targets, but even then, they should only be seen as supplemental damage, and never the focus of the build. If you're struggling to get hits on a boss, then this charm will guarantee you get at least some damage off while you focus on healing and dodging. Last of all, Weaversong also unlocks bonus dialogue and dream dialogue with the midwife in Deep Nest. Weaversong special interactions. Combining Grubsong and Weaversong will cause any damage the Weavelings deal to generate 3 soul, even from enemies that don't usually give soul. Oddly enough, this can even trigger after death, meaning you can spawn with a minuscule amount of soul. When combining Sprintmaster and Weaversong, Weavelings will move 50% faster, as well as jump further. Dream Wielder. This charm costs 1 notch and increases the speed and soul gain for the Dream Nail. This charm is obtained from the Seer in the Resting Rounds as a reward for collecting 500 essence. Dream Wielder reduces the total animation time of the Dream Nail by around 32%, taking it from 1.85 seconds to 1.26 seconds, although in reality these numbers are slightly lower as any input can cancel the last few frames. The time it takes for the Dream Nail to actually hit an enemy is reduced by 37.5%, going from 1.36 seconds to 0.85 seconds. It also doubles the soul gained when Dream Nailing an enemy, giving you 66 soul instead of 33. Last of all, it increases the chance you'll receive essence from killing enemies by 50%. You'll have a 1 in 200 chance of getting Dream Essence from normal enemies with this charm equipped, or if you've been using the Dream Gate a lot, this will shoot up to a 1 in 40 chance. Dream Wielder is to the Dream Nail what Nailmaster's Glory is to Nail Arts. Both charms greatly reduce the charge time of their respective abilities, so much that they become a lot smoother to use in combat. The Dream Nail in particular, with its huge wind-up of 1.85 seconds, is almost unusable in combat unless Dream Wielder is equipped. The Dream Nail gives a load of soul if you can land it, with a whopping 66 per hit, and all for only 1 notch. This can save loads of notches on what you might have otherwise had to use for soul generating charms, meaning more freedom in your build. This is particularly good for spellcasting builds, but any build can benefit from it, as its 1 notch makes it very easy to accommodate. This is the most notch efficient soul generating charm in the game. However, it requires you to actively use it, compared to other soul generating charms that work in a more passive manner, and it can be extremely hard or impossible to use against many bosses. Dream Wielder special interactions. When combining Dream Wielder and Dreamshield, the Dreamshield will be 15% larger in size. Dreamshield. This charm costs 3 notches and creates an orbiting shield around the knight. This charm can be found in the Resting Grounds in a room below the Seer. Dreamshield creates a shield that orbits around the knight. The shield can block an unlimited amount of non-piercing projectiles, and will deal 100% nail damage if contacting an enemy, which will cause it to vanish for 2.15 seconds. If you could somehow manage to hit an enemy off cooldown with a pure nail, this would work out to 9.76 damage per second. The shield takes 3.25 seconds to complete 1 rotation around the knight. While focusing, the orbit speed is increased by 173%, instead taking 1.2 seconds. This makes it much more likely to intercept slow-moving projectiles. Dreamshield is a great all-round charm, offering both defense by blocking projectiles, as well as offense by damaging foes who cross its path. Each time you strike with your nail, the shield will double the size of its forward-facing hitbox, which allows you to damage enemies that would normally be outside its orbit range. This comes with a downside, however. The entire time the shield is doing its attack animation, it loses the ability to block projectiles completely. This can catch many off guard and prove fatal, so avoid spamming attacks needlessly. Dreamshield is good for both exploring areas and fighting bosses with ranged attacks. And if the only threats are projectiles, it can often get you a free heal and save you from being interrupted. Of course, due to its rotation, it doesn't block every shot, and piercing projectiles in particular, as well as specific other projectiles, will go right through it. But if you play aggressively when it's pointing towards the enemy, and defensively when it's not, its drawbacks can be somewhat mitigated. Dreamshield Special Interactions. When combining Dream Wielder and Dreamshield, the Dreamshield will be 15% larger in size. Grimmchild. This charm costs 2 notches and summons Grimmchild to fight with you. This charm is obtained from Troopmaster Grimm in Dirtmouth after starting the Grimm Troop in Howling Cliffs. The Grimmchild charm, as the name suggests, will summon Grimmchild that will follow and fight with you. At first, Grimmchild will not attack, but progressing the Grimm Troop content will upgrade the charm and unlock a ranged attack. This attack starts out doing 5 damage and will gain 3 damage each time the charm is upgraded, capping out at a max of 11 damage. The final stage of this can only be obtained by defeating Nightmare King Grimm, which is no easy task. If the knight chooses the banish option, however, the charm will instead be replaced with Carefree Melody and no longer be obtainable. But more on that in the next section. The other function this charm has is to mark uncollected flames on the map and allow you to fight the Grimmkin at each location. Once defeated, the flame will be absorbed. Once enough of these are absorbed, you'll be able to upgrade the charm to its next stage. It's also required to be worn when fighting Troopmaster Grimm. Note that whenever fighting Master Grimm, the summon will not actually be present, essentially making you waste 2 notches. The summon itself is pretty useless early on, and isn't worth using outside of hunting the Grimmkin down. Once it's fully upgraded though, it deals decent damage for only 2 notches. Once again, I did a DPS test against Brooding Morlach, only dealing damage with the summon. It took 183.7 seconds to chew through the 1050 health, and only a few shots missed their mark. This resulted in 5.7 damage per second, which was about 1 more DPS than the Weaverlings. Like all summons, this is only really supplemental damage that should complement either spells or nail attacks, but it is one of the better companion charms. While Weaversong is somewhat competitive against slow, immobile targets, Grimmchild, with its ranged attack and ability to fly, has less trouble hitting things, and doesn't waste time falling off ledges like the Weaverlings do. Grimmchild makes up an important part of the summoner build with its range and damage. All 3 summon charms, as well as Grubsong, which easily generated enough soul to fuel Glowing Womb, managed to get through the Brooding Morlach DPS test in 86.06 seconds, which translates to 12.2 damage per second. Of course, keep in mind, this is an unrealistically good scenario, and summon DPS in particular can be very inconsistent. Last of all, Grimmchild will unlock unique dialogue when talking with the White Lady. Grimmchild has no special interactions. Carefree Melody. This charm costs 3 notches and has a chance to negate damage. This charm is obtained from Nim in Dirtmouth after banishing the Grimm Troop. Note that doing this will prevent fighting the troop's final boss and replaces the Grimmchild charm. Carefree Melody has a chance to block all damage completely, which increases every time it fails to trigger, and resets once it does. Carefree Melody cannot trigger off back-to-back hits. As you can see on the graph shown, it has a 0% chance right after it blocks damage that will gradually increase as more hits are taken. On the third column, we can see the probability that the charm will trigger at a specific amount of hits. This takes into account how likely it is to get to this point without triggering the charm in a previous hit, as well as the current hits percent to trigger. For example, having the charm trigger on the 6th hit should only occur 5.86% of the time. And, unless you're either lucky or unlucky, we can see hits 3 and 4 are, on average, the most common times a trigger will occur. When comparing Carefree Melody to the other health charms, it doesn't do well at first glance. Triggering an average of 22.46% of the time means it can be considered to boost your total masks by 22.46% as well. If you have 9 masks, this would net you another 2 health for an efficiency of 0.66 health per notch, or 0.82 if you had 11 health. Well below both heart charms. This does change, however, the longer the fight goes and the more healing you're able to get off, as the more times you're able to be hit before dying, the more chance it has to trigger and the more health it generates. Another way to look at this is every 4.5 heals you can get off will likely net you another free mask. Just keep in mind, to even break even with Lifeblood Core, you'll need to heal a total of 9 masks, and trigger Carefree Melody 4 times, which is quite a lot. And keep in mind, this is all just averages. You may get extremely lucky or unlucky with the RNG. Although damage is prevented, the knight will still receive invincibility frames as if he was hit. Any charms that proc on taking damage, such as Thorns of Agony and Stalwart Shell, will still trigger. The exception being Grubsong, which requires masks to actually be lost before it gives soul. Sadly, this does not prevent the delicate flower from breaking when getting hit, even when Carefree Melody triggers. However, Baldur Shell will not lose durability. Strangely enough, the hit counter does not reset upon death, or even unequipping the charm. This mechanic can be abused and creates a powerful use versus Radiant difficulty boss fights, where you can set up a situation with a high chance of not dying to the first hit. Carefree Melody has no special interactions. Kingsoul. This charm costs 5 notches and passively generates soul. This charm is obtained by finding both white fragments, one in the Queen's Garden from the White Lady, and the other in the White Palace. Once both are collected, they will combine and turn into Kingsoul. Kingsoul generates 4 soul every 2 seconds. This means you can heal or cast a free spell once every 16.5 seconds, although you'll have to wait for the last tick, so in reality, this may become 18 seconds if you had exactly 0 soul previously. This makes it well suited for platforming segments as well as spellcaster builds, but there are a few problems with this. For starters, it's found so late into the game that it's very likely you've already done every difficult platforming section. And then there's that nasty notch cost. At 5 notches, it's the most costly charm in the game to use, and while its effects are good on paper, instantly wiping out 5 notches hamstrings any would-be builds and relegates it only to really being useful for playing super cautiously in the delicate flower delivery. It does have some synergy with Glowing Womb, as it cancels out the soul drain from spawning hatchlings, but even here, we're left with the same problem, not enough notches to fill the build out. Since Kingsoul generates soul passively, and not on a per hit basis, it's a bit trickier to compare it with other soul generating charms. We can however see how many hits you'd need to match the soul generation of 2 per second. Only counting bonus soul from a given charm, and not the base amount, you would need to hit something once every 1.5 seconds with Soul Catcher or the Weaveling Grubsong combo, once every 4 seconds with Soul Eater, and Dreamnail something once every 16.5 seconds with Dream Wielder. So if you're in a fight where it's difficult to land shots, the soul generation isn't that bad. Of course, all of these options cost significantly less notches. Kingsoul is a great looking charm, and is a cool and unique idea. And I get the Pale King was all about no cost being too great and all, but I've got to disagree with him here. Kingsoul cost is too great for what it does, and it's just not worth using over charms that achieve similar results for far less commitment. Speaking to the White Lady does unlock some additional dialogue with her, which is kinda cool, but otherwise its main use is for unlocking a secret area in the Abyss, which leads us onto our lucky last charm. Oh, and Kingsoul has no special interactions. Void Heart. This charm costs 0 notches and is always equipped once found. It causes shades in the void to become passive. This charm is found in a secret area in the Abyss. This area is only accessible with Kingsoul equipped, and you'll need to Dreamnail the egg with an awoken Dreamnail. Void Heart causes shades, including the ones you leave behind after dying, to no longer attack you. Furthermore, your shade will be set to 1 HP, meaning you only need to hit it 1 time to get it back. The tendrils that rise out of the void in the Abyss will also become passive. Void Heart replaces Kingsoul upon obtaining it, and becomes permanently equipped from then on. Luckily though, it doesn't take up any notches, giving it the title of the cheapest charm in the game. As we discussed, Kingsoul is of limited use anyway, so it's not really a big loss. There isn't really a lot to say about Void Heart. It's mostly there for story related reasons, and unlocks a different ending and boss, although it is a nice quality of life feature to not have your shade fight back when you die. Void Heart unlocks additional dialogue when speaking to Gigi, Jin, the White Lady, Hornet, and Bardoon. Void Heart has no special interactions. Now that we've covered all of the charms, you'll need some notches to actually equip them. You start with 3 notches, and can get another 8 by various means for a total of 11. Notches 1 to 4 can be purchased from Salubra with Geo at the bottom of Forgotten Crossroads. Each notch will become available once a certain number of charms are collected. Notch 1 costs 120 Geo and requires 5 charms. Notch 2 costs 500 Geo and requires 10 charms. Notch 3 costs 900 Geo and requires 18 charms. Notch 4 costs 1400 Geo and requires 25 charms. Notch 5 can be found in Fog Canyon in a hidden area. To access this, you'll need Isma's Tear to swim through Acid and Monarch Wings. Starting in Dirtmouth, follow this route as shown. Notch 6 is found in Fungal Wastes. To get there, start from Leg Eater and follow the route as shown. Once you get to this point, you'll have to fight 2 Shroomal Ogres. Defeat both and the notch will fall to the ground. Notch 7 is located at the Colosseum of Fools. This is accessed by getting to the top of Kingdom's Edge. Once there, simply pay the 100 Geo fee and beat the first trial, the Trial of the Warrior. This is by far the easiest and you should have no trouble. Just don't forget to sit at a bench downstairs, just in case. Once you kill the last enemy, a notch will be awarded. Notch 8 is awarded after defeating Troopmaster Grimm the first time. To get to this fight, you'll have to start the Grimm troop in the Howling Cliffs secret area. This is done by dream nailing the corpse at the end and striking the fire with your nail until it lights. From there, proceed back to Dirtmouth until you find the tent and meet Grimm. Once he gives you the Grimmchild charm, equip it and hunt down the flames on the map, then report back to Grimm. Repeat this one more time and the boss fight in Dirtmouth will become available, as long as the Grimmchild charm is equipped. Defeat Grimm and be awarded the 8th and final notch. And last off, we have the mechanic known as Overcharming. If you attempt to equip a charm, but don't have enough notches, it will automatically be unequipped as expected. However, you can keep trying to equip the charm, and eventually you can force it to stay on and enter the Overcharm state. After the first time, you'll no longer have to spam the equip button to Overcharm. In the Overcharm state, you'll take double damage, so it's not recommended for inexperienced players. In exchange for this debuff, you'll be allowed to squeeze in an extra charm you normally wouldn't have room for. This is probably not worth doing in normal play, unless you're extremely skilled. However, for Radiant fights, where taking any damage will kill you regardless, it's the optimal way to play. I hope you found this video informative and helpful in your Hollow Knight journey. I can't wait to do the same for when Silksong comes out, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on that. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for watching.